Welcome to Beyond the Music, the podcast where we dive into the lives and stories of people who shaped the world of music. I am Lena.
And I am Karina. We're both classically trained singers, and this podcast is our chance to explore the fascinating intersections of music, history, and humanity.
Last episode, you heard all about opera and its superstitions. Yeah. And today's episode is about a musical phenomenon that is as haunting as it is extraordinary. The castrato.
Oh no! Oh no! Lena!
So staying with the superstitions and haunting stuff, I'm keeping the line. Castratos.
This makes me so uncomfortable.
Well,
no,
you have to sit through that now.
I know I do because it's your episode.
Well, for the people who don't know, the castratos were male singers castrated before puberty to preserve their high, unbroken voices. Voices that would come to dominate European opera stages for over 200 years.
Yeah.
But behind these angelic sounds lies a story of immense sacrifice, physical alteration, social paradox, and cultural power. So let's begin with the basics. A castrato.
Oh no.
Yes, was a male singer who underwent castration before puberty to prevent his voice from dropping through the testosterone going on the larynx. And yeah,
the natural voice change because
exactly.
of hormones from testosterone.
Yeah. The result was a voice that combined the high, flexible range of a boy soprano with the power and breath control of an adult man. The practice became widespread in Italy from the late 16th to the 18th century, especially in the Papal States, where women were banned from singing in churches. This created a demand for high voices that could still be heard in sacred contexts. And from there, the trend made its way to opera. So, yeah, it's again because women were not allowed to do something. This time, men had to suffer from that.
Yeah, just let us do stuff. Just
exactly.
Let us do stuff, and then this wouldn't happen. Just putting that out there.
Well, I don't know, Karina. Did you ever hear? I mean, there is a recording of one of the last castratos. Did you ever hear that?
I did, and there's no words to describe it, at least for me, because I do know what happened in order to create this.
Yeah, it's not nice practice, but I think it's important that we inform about it so it does not happen again. With it, like a lot of stuff in history should be reported about so it doesn't happen again. Well, the sound, you can Google him. I will talk about him later a little bit, but the sound of his castrato is often described as otherworldly. A castrato's voice was said to have both brilliance and warmth with a resonance and volume that surpasses most female sopranos. Audiences were fascinated by the physical and emotional impact of that sound. But what many didn't realize or choose to ignore was the reality behind it. So let's talk about the darker side. Castration was a painful and dangerous procedure. It involved removing or damaging the testicles before puberty, which could lead to complications, hormonal imbalances, and also death. Many boys never recovered. The decision was often made by poor families who saw a chance for their sons to rise socially through music. But of the thousands of boys who were castrated, only a small number became professional singers, and even fewer became stars. The operation did not guarantee talent. Some ended up with average voices or none at all. Most of these boys received limited education. If they didn't succeed musically, they were left with no clear path forward in life, cut off from the traditional masculinity, yet never fully embraced by society. Now, there's something surprising to many. Castrati were often not celibate. Because they could not impregnate women, they were frequently seen as safe lovers by noble women, aristocrats, and even married ladies. This created a quite bizarre dynamic. These men, modified for the sake of religious and musical purity, often became highly desirable sexual partners. Yeah, I don't know if the church liked that, but well, they created them.
Ooh.
Well, Karina, can you imagine being pushed into such a fate at such a young age before you even understood what was being taken from you?
I'm sorry, but do you know the scene they did on Saturday Night Live with Ariana Grande? She was playing a castrati.
I think I saw that, but it's long ago.
Well, for our listeners, find it on YouTube. Ariana Grande, Saturday Night Live, castrati. It does bring in a lot of humor, but it was quite a traumatic event that these young boys went through to create that.
Yeah.
So, in answer to your question, no, I cannot imagine what those boys went through.
I mean, there were some boys, they probably, at that age, they couldn't even really understand what it meant. But there were also some boys who were already, like, really good boy sopranos and who, like, were the ones saying they wanted to be castrated, to keep their voices, to keep doing what they did. I don't know if they regretted it. I guess some did, some maybe didn't, because they were good in what they did afterwards. But still, it's the same. Like, you shouldn't give a decision like that to a child, and you shouldn't even decide about something like this about a child. Yeah, but there were those who succeeded and were celebrated. Of those castratis. On stage, castrati were given the leading roles. They were gods, warriors, emperors. They symbolized a kind of vocal perfection that no one else could match. Kind of strange vocal perfection, if you would call it that, but still. Yeah. The biggest name in the castrato world was Farinelli. Born as Carlo Broschi in 1705, he was the Beyoncé or Freddie Mercury of his time. The audiences fainted at his performances. Critics compared his voice to magic. Farinelli's vocal range spanned over 3 octaves, and he could sustain a single note for more than a minute. His technique, agility, and expressive power inspired composers to write entire roles just for him. But his fame came at a cost. Farinelli eventually left the stage and moved to Spain, where he served as the private singer for King Philip V, who suffered from mental illness. For nearly a decade, Farinelli sang the same handful of arias each night to help calm the king. I mean, imagine having all that talent, having done that procedure also, and spending your later years essentially as a musical nurse. Yeah. I found there are reconstructions of Farinelli's music And there are countertenors trying to imitate his roles. But of course, you can never kind of recreate the real sound. You can just guess it from the one recording that from the other castrato, which still lived quite late. But you will probably never know how it really sounded. Well, and what did they sing and who wrote for them? Castrati were the megastars of the Baroque opera. Composers like Handel, Porpora, Hasse, and Vivaldi wrote challenging ornate arias that showcased their full vocal range. These pieces often featured rapid scales, arpeggios, and dramatic leaps, pushing the human voice to its limits. They sang roles of gods like Apollo, generals like Julius Caesar, and tragic heroes in operas filled with war, love, and betrayal. These weren't just beautiful songs. They were displays of power and technique. Even Mozart in the 18th century still composed for castrati. The role of Sesto in La Clemenza di Tito was written for a castrato, though today it's often sung by a mezzo-soprano or countertenor. So, when you hear those arias, they have a lot of coloraturas normally in it and are even hard for some sopranos to sing. What do you feel when you hear those today? I mean, you will never hear them with the castrato, but they are written for them.
I mean, I definitely think that it is good that the social fashion has moved past that, and we are now employing voices that are naturally suited for those roles instead of doing something physical to make it.
Yeah, actually, at least you can get kind of one good thing from it, because the fact that there were castratos and then that it wasn't allowed at one point anymore, the operas already existed. They needed someone who sang that roles. Most roles are normally performed now by women, by mezzo-soprani, who have that range and the flexibility. And I mean, as I still was a mezzo-soprano before I became a soprano, I was singing Sesto, and I really loved that role. It was challenging, but it was really it did a lot of fun. So at least there's now through that a little more female roles, kind of like Hosenrolle, like the pants role. That is something which was created by that, because they did then need someone looking boyish and sounding boyish instead of a castrato, so they took women. Yay! So, the decline of the castratos. What happened?
Good.
By the late 1700s, the practice of creating castrati began to fall out of favor. The Enlightenment brought new ideals about the body, consent, and human dignity. Opera itself began to change, with composers favoring more naturalistic voices and characters. By the 19th century, the age of the castrato was over. The Vatican officially banned the practice, though some castrati continued to sing in the Sistine Chapel for a time. The last known castrato, Alessandro Moreschi, lived into the early 20th century and even made a few eerie recordings, which I already noticed. You can Google him, but you have to listen to the recordings with the thought in mind. He was already quite old then, and he also wasn't the best castrato of his time. Like he was average singer, it was said. So you have to know that, but you can get a little glimpse of how it's probably sounded. Today, some countertenors attempt to revive the sound of castrato arias, singing in falsetto to access those high ranges, but it's not the same. The physical structure of a castrato body, tall, often barrel-chested with large rib cages, produced a vocal resonance that can't be imitated. But still, the legacy lives on in the music, in our fascination and the uncomfortable questions it raises. So, what do we do with this legacy? The story of the castrati is one of beauty born from sacrifice, of artistic triumph shadowed by physical pain and ethical questions. Big ethical questions.
Very big.
Yeah. And it is of a voice that shouldn't have existed. But once it did, the world couldn't look away. So the castrato voice challenges our ideas of gender power and the limits of what are demands. It's like, I mean, if not a powerful person would have thought, like, I want to keep that, let's just try and castrate something and see what happens. I mean, someone had to have the thought first. And I think it wasn't a mother, it wasn't a normal person, it was something high up there who were thinking about, we can do everything with the people. So, if you found this episode as haunting and thought-provoking as Karina and I did...
Stop!
who was like frowning the whole episode through. I mean, you can see her, but yeah. I can tell you she wasn't pleased.
No, I now have frown lines. Yeah. Thank you, Lena.
You're welcome.
It's just the enduring friendship we have. You give me frown lines.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who loves music history.
Next time, we'll delve into another fascinating chapter of music history. Until then, keep listening and discovering the stories beyond the music. See you next time.